Welcome everyone, and welcome to Marika, Brussel. Marika, you're a dancer, and you were a dancer at PA and then LaGuardia, and really so delighted to be able to talk with you. I think in this series of conversations, you're the first dancer that we've had. And just to let our fellow graduates and anyone else who's listening know, you're a dancer and now a choreographer in the Bay Area, and along the way, you delved into fiction writing and earned an MFA in fiction writing from, why am I blanking?
From Sarah Lawrence.
From Sarah Lawrence, of course.
Yeah.
I was thinking St. Lawrence. It's not St. Lawrence, it's Sarah Lawrence, right? No, very, very important program. Really great to have you here. How are you holding up during COVID? Yeah, everyone I've talked to so far has been on the East Coast. What's it like to be in San Francisco during this time and to do your work?
Well, it's different every day, as I'm sure it is wherever you are.
Yeah.
I found like the first few weeks, I was not creative at all. And I was really frustrated by it. I felt really stifled and freaked out, and just like living in this little bubble of the moment and the moment and the moment. And then something happened and I became very creative, and I've been doing a lot more stuff than I've ever done. So that's been really interesting.
Well, what does it mean to be creative during this time? Because as a choreographer, I think of you, and as a teacher, I think of you teaching a lot of people and being with a lot of people in person. So how does that work for you now?
I'm doing it all through Zoom.
Wow.
So I wouldn't say that I've become less of a technophobe, because I still get very frustrated. And usually, I know you're recording this, and I would say 3/4 of the time I record myself watching.
I'm sorry?
I record when I record rehearsals, I record myself watching.
Yeah.
So after I'll look and I'll be like, oh, I can't wait to see what we did. And then it's just me going like, oh. So after 4 months, I'm still figuring out the technology, but it's become much more comfortable to do it. It's like in the studio, there's a lot of magic, just being together and creating something new. And doing it through Zoom has its own magic, and it's not immediate.
Yeah. I found out a little bit as a congregational rabbi. I thought, all of this was so improvised. When our synagogue shut down, I thought, oh my gosh, the magic is about people being together and connecting with each other, what's it going to be like? And then we had a gathering on Zoom, and I found it really surprising at how much people can connect with each other. What's that been like for you?
Well, the connection for sure. Like, I've been working on this ballet that was supposed to premiere in April, which it didn't. So when we shut down in March and we all came home in March, we've still been rehearsing every week for it. And sometimes it's just that we'll actually rehearse for 10 minutes, but we're together on Zoom for an hour. And that's been really great. It feels like it expands our time in a way, like instead of just being in the now all the time and feeling like there are walls around us, it gives us a glimpse into, we're working towards something. We're still working towards something. And that's been really hopeful, I think, for the dancers and for me.
Yeah. Tell us about that project. I was reading a little bit about it.
I'm excited about it. I'm also excited to not be working on it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing something else eventually. It's called House of Names. And I started with Lot's wife, actually, in Genesis. And I was looking for women who weren't given names or who had something taken away from them, and giving them back their power. So the ballet, it's a lot of little sections. Cassandra, who's a mythological character who everyone may know, may not. She had the power of prophecy, and she prophesied the Trojan War. And then Apollo tried to seduce her, and she said, no, thanks. And he said, okay, well, no one's ever going to believe you. You're always going to see the truth, and no one was ever going to believe you. And I thought that was really appropriate for our times. Even before COVID, when I started working on this last year, the Me Too movement. And so she's the narrator
Mm-hmm.
um, for the whole ballet.
Hmm.
Uh, and then there's Lot's wife, who I gave her a name. And then there's La Llorona, which is, it's a Latin American um, story. It's like Medea. She kills her children and then spends the rest of her life in grief
Hmm.
and mourning. And I'm telling that story as a postpartum psychosis story.
Wow.
And so there's her, and then the voices in her head, and her trying to sort of wrangle those voices and recognize them as herself.
Hmm.
And I'm also going to do Miriam, a story. Miriam sort of like being one of the first leaders and uh, one of the more powerful women who doesn't have a lot of notoriety.
Yeah, well, tell us more about that, because people listening may not be familiar with the story of Miriam. Lot's wife is, I think, a little bit more mythological in our,
Yeah.
culture, but Miriam maybe not so much.
Well, so Miriam, so Moses in the Ten Commandments. I think most people know there was a movie, um, and
Two movies.
really.
Well, there's Cecil B. DeMille, right?
Oh yeah.
Which I have a rabbi friend that's his favorite movie of all time, and we always laugh about it because there's so many like bizarre things in it. And then there's Prince of Egypt, the Disney animated
Oh,
version,
great,
which is
great.
actually deeply textually informed. So with
Interesting.
Mariah Carey, I think, sings a big number in that.
Nice.
Yeah.
People used to think I looked like Marika because of the hair. Um, so Miriam was Moses's
Yeah.
sister,
Yeah.
and he was the one actually who sent him down the river to be saved by the Pharaoh's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So she's already a heroine in that. And then after the Jews were allowed to leave Egypt, this is my understanding, you can totally correct me. The people got disheartened in the desert for 40 years, and she sort of led them in song and dance and gave them back hope.
Yeah.
That's the part of the story that I'm interested in, because the rest of my ballet is so bleak that I wanted something with a little hope.
Yeah.
And her being able to rise up and lead people and change their feeling about reality,
Yeah.
I thought is really important right now too.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, it resonates as someone who knows the story and the different layers of interpretation historically around the story. That theme really around Miriam really resonates with me, and I look forward to seeing at least an excerpt of that when you put it out there. But what about the story behind the stories? Like what intrigued you about these stories? What moved you to choose these stories? What moved you to look at these stories and then create a ballet out of them?
Well, all the ballets that have done in the past are narrative,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm interested in stories, and I think that people can connect to stories better than people can connect to an idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my goal in choreographing is to have people empathize.
Mm-hmm.
Is to sort of bring forth that feeling in people, so we can connect better as human beings, and try to move forward instead of what seems to happen.
Uh-huh.
So I collaborated with a composer for this ballet, and her name, a composer, her name is Carla Lucero.
Mm-hmm.
She's local here, and I met her. We were both on a panel
Oh, wow.
last year about women composers and choreographers, and we realized we're trying to do the same thing. Like, we're trying to show social justice issues through classical forms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is, I think, pretty unusual for ballet and for classical music. So we started talking about which stories we wanted to do, and we thought about Lilith because I've always been interested in that story. And I think we started talking about stories that I've always liked Greek myths, and she didn't really know Greek myths, but she knew a lot of Latin American stuff because her parents are from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So we just started sort of brainstorming, and I honestly can't remember why we picked these particular stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I did it, I don't know. I don't know, they just seem to resonate with the times. Like these were particular stories that resonated for me about what was happening in our country and in our world right now.
Yeah, yeah. How did you develop the mission to link the classical form that you've learned for your whole life of ballet with the sense of social responsibility that you have, and the sense of communal responsibility that you have? At what point did that become part of your consciousness? How did you develop that?
I think it started with the homelessness ballet I did in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't so much a conscious thing as, oh, I want to be a social justice choreographer.
Mm-hmm.
It was a particular story, and it was that particular story that I wanted to tell.
Huh.
And then after, and I'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
But after that, I realized that the stories that I think are important are social justice stories, and not just like not like, oh, give Marika a social justice issue and she'll make a ballet, but things that feel important to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the homelessness one was actually a really personal story, and I feel like personal stories are easier for me to talk about as opposed to abstract, like, bigger issues. So the homelessness story came from originally just because I live in San Francisco, and the homelessness is horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have talked a little bit about this, but it makes New York when we were growing up look like paradise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's shocking. Like there aren't words for what it's like. Mm-hmm. And I live in a neighborhood. I live near the public hospital, mm-hmm. and so people go in and then they kind of stay around mm-hmm. the hospital. So I found myself after just walking by and kind of wanting to shut it out. Mm. So I thought, well, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person who shuts it out. So maybe I can make something about it. Mm-hmm. And I actually had been working on a ballet based on an African story called My Life in a Bush of Ghosts, which is about this boy who escapes from slavery and finds himself in a forest full of ghosts. And I thought, well, what in that story is relevant to my life now? And I was walking by and I thought, oh, like the people who are homeless are like ghosts, like we don't even see them. Mm-hmm. So I started doing that. And then about 2 months later, I realized the story was really about my father, who had been homeless when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't even put it together. And as soon as I put it together, like the story changed, and I expanded it and made it into a full-length thing.
What was that like to realize that this story that you'd been creating sort of almost outside yourself, in relationship to yourself, but outside yourself, was actually coming from within you?
Oh, it was fascinating. I thought, wow, Marika, you thought you knew yourself, but you really don't. You didn't even realize that this huge thing is what you've been working on all the time. I worked on it when I was at Sarah Lawrence. My thesis was a novel about my father from his point of view. I felt like everything I had ever done artistically was really about that. And then here I am doing it again.
Wow.
And
what were the circumstances of his life?
He was a heroin addict. Mm-hmm. So when my mom left him when I was 11, he just didn't have the wherewithal obviously he was resilient because he didn't die from it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he ended up on the street, and he lived on the street in Chinatown, and then he lived in the dressing room of Theater for the New City for a couple of years. And eventually he got clean, and he lived in Saratoga Springs until he was 84. Yeah.
And when did he die? How long ago was that?
5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a relationship with him?
Yeah, we had a great relation. We really always had a relationship, but we ended up having a good relationship. I saw him, even though I lived in California. I talked to him a couple times a week, and I saw him the month before he died. We spent a week together.
Well, well.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for your loss. I imagine for your father that the opportunity to be connected to you and have a relationship with you, despite everything that happened, must have been a tremendous source of comfort and happiness for him.
I hope so.
Yeah, yeah. So how did that come to be part of the ballet?
Um, how exactly do you mean? Like,
Well, his story, your connection to him,
oh,
your distance and reconciliation. If
well, once
that's
I realized that I was telling that story,
yeah.
I thought, well, I've told the story from his point of view, or what I imagine his point of view it was, but I've never told the story from my point of view,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
child. And so I thought of how I could make a narrative about it, and maybe have a different ending. Like my ending, I feel like was good. I mean, he got clean. When I was in my 20s, and we ended up having a relationship. But I always felt like I didn't save him. Like I always felt like I should have been the one. I don't feel this way anymore. But growing up, I always felt like the way kids do. If I were better, it wouldn't be like this. If I loved him enough, it wouldn't
mm-hmm,
be like this.
mm-hmm,
Um, which I realize now is not true.
mm-hmm,
Um, but as a kid, you do think that. So I thought, well, what if I made the ballet and she does save him in some way?
mm-hmm,
Um, so I have the ballet starts out with her being young, like 10, and I have a kid in the ballet. And I have a character who's addiction, who is basically on his back.
mm-hmm,
And addiction seduces him away from the family. And then it flashes forward to when she is in her, a teenager or in her 20s. It's not definitive.
mm-hmm.
She goes into a homeless encampment to try to find him, and she does find him.
Um, there's a people can see an excerpt of the ballet online on your website, and what I noted about the dancers is that at any given point there were maybe between 3 and 6 dancers, I think, on the stage in that excerpt, and there were 2 who are in a tent, in a pop-up tent, and was the tent the designated home of the addicted character?
Yeah.
Okay, because he sort of emerges kind of as this kind of ghostly specter from the tent, and then it's really quite dramatic. It was notable to me that not only was this, was your awareness about the personal dimensions of the story in the background and something that deeply informed the work, but that you were very upfront about it in speaking with the press when people came to do reviews. And there were a number of very public reviews and very laudatory reviews of this piece. How comfortable what was it like for you to take that step and tell reporters and reviewers that this was a deeply personal story?
Um, I've never not talked about it.
Yeah,
So it felt kind of like a relief in a
yeah.
way. And then what was incredibly satisfying to me and unexpected was after the ballet, I got a lot of emails and notices from people who had seen it, who had like either just seen that little documentary about it or had seen the actual ballet, saying, I was homeless for a little while when I was a kid, and I've always been really ashamed, and this made me feel connected. And if like that made me feel like it was successful.
Hmm.
Like that was the best part
Hmm.
of having done this ballet, was being able to have people say, I don't feel ashamed anymore, or I always felt I was the only one, or I had to go to school and nobody knew.
Wow. Wow. So reaching people in that way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you say you always talked about it, even when you were a little kid?
Yeah, but not when I was a little kid. Probably starting when I was a teenager. I was really ashamed when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Really embarrassed. But when I was a teenager and a young adult, I would bring it up in like inappropriate ways, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, hi, my name's Marika. My father's a heroin addict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but when I was a little kid, like when I went to ballet, the ballet studio, and he would come see me, that was pretty awful.
Mhm, mhm.
I remember
Uh,
we would go to Bagel Buffet. I don't know if you remember Bagel Buffet. It was on 6th Avenue and 8th Street.
mhm.
It's near where I went to where Joffrey was, where I went to ballet.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would meet him there after my class on Saturdays. And I just remember really clearly like that he would be nodding out a lot of the time and kind of smell bad. And, you know, this feeling of like, I love him and this is really horrible. And I want to pretend I don't know him.
Mhm.
I very clearly remember those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine what it's like. And when you say that you um, brought it up in clearly inappropriate ways, as a young person, I don't think there's a socially appropriate way to bring it up. It's a completely um, it's a completely disruptive situation for a young person. There's nothing appropriate about it.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I have talked about it with people I was friends with then
Yeah.
when I was really little, like, 11, 12, when we would take the subway from Queens
Hmm.
to Manhattan to go to ballet together. And we never talked about it. And we talked about it a couple of years ago. I talked about it with one person and she said, I wish I had known because my father was a hoarder. And I was really ashamed and embarrassed. And I always pictured your family being perfect. And I was like, oh, I always pictured your family being perfect.
Hmm. That's a
Um,
good. Why do you think so? Why do you think you and your dancer friends envisioned your each other's families being perfect?
I mean, I'm just guessing, but I think we just idealized other families.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. I think of so I think of dancers, especially young dancers, and this was certainly my experience of dancers when we were in high school, that they project this image of really being uh, in control of their bodies, in control of their presentation. Um, they look kind of regal, right? Even if they're just sort of walking around, they look regal. The posture is good, the gaze is right, everything, you know. And I can only imagine if you're with other dancers, and I imagine, you know, part of the dynamic of being with other dancers is that it's somewhat competitive as well, is that
Mhm.
you're all thinking, well, that person's perfect and I'm not, or that
Oh, yeah,
person's more, yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I know for me, being in the studio and ballet specifically, I feel like it saved me. Like it
Yeah.
was a place I could go to that was mine, and I didn't have to think about the other things in my life, and I could just focus. Like I knew how to get better. I knew how to, um, I knew what to do, and I didn't know what to do in the rest of my life. And I know a lot of dancers who felt that way about dance.
Well, well. I mean, I know this may almost sound cliche, but I think of the song from a chorus line. Everything is beautiful at the ballet. You know,
Uh-huh.
the song is a deeply painful song. If I remember correctly, the singer comes from an abusive home, but then she goes to the ballet or goes to ballet class, and everything is just
Yeah.
it's her
Yeah.
zone. Wow. Well, that's deeply profound. Tell us more, because I remember when we were talking, you told me that you started going to classes at the Joffrey School when you were 3. So
Uh, well, no, I started going to the Joffrey when I was 10.
oh, 10. Okay.
Yeah, but I started dancing when I was 3.
Amazing.
My mom was a dancer.
Hmm.
Now she's a rabbi,
Yeah.
but she was a dancer. When we lived in Queens, we had a dance school in our house. She was a modern dancer, so she was my first teacher.
Mhm.
And my brother, we both like that's what you did after school because that's what was happening in our house. So we just took dance classes all the time. And then I found that ballet really suited me much more because it was structured and there was no structure in our house. So the structure was really enticing to me. It still is. Like I loved schedules. I would like make up my ideal pretend schedule. If I went to boarding school, this would be my schedule. And it was so great. Um, I still feel that way. It's a little hard being in quarantine because I'm like, ah.
Yeah.
um, and then I started going to Joffrey when I was 10, and I
Mhm.
went there until I stopped dancing. And I stopped dancing early, and I took 10 years off, and then I came back.
Yeah, yeah. And what role did performing arts and the whole high school experience play for you in this?
Um, it was a strange time, as I imagine it was for everybody. Um, it was the first time I wanted to be like cool,
Uh-huh.
I think, and I didn't just want to be a ballet dancer.
Hmm.
So in some ways, it kind of switched me off dancing a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, and because I had been so serious about ballet for so long,
Yeah.
and a lot of people there were dancing um, in a different way, or it was like this was the more serious time for them.
Hmm.
I think I took a little bit of a superior attitude for a
Hmm.
lot of it. I think those years were not my best years as a person.
Hmm.
But I met my best friend there. She's still my best friend.
Yeah.
Um, and like the connections that I made in high school, I still have, or I'm getting again because of
Hmm.
social media. And
Yeah.
also I went to our 30th reunion,
Uh-huh.
which
I
was the only,
unfortunately missed that for some reason. I couldn't, I had a conflict. I couldn't go.
I think it's okay that you think it was odd. But my husband came. It was interesting. It was interesting, but it was odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, because it was at the school and there was no alcohol. Uh, and they have like a lot of reunions at the same time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so my husband really liked that. He's like, I don't know anybody. So now I have all these other people and that's cool. But I was like, who are these people? Like they graduated in like 56. Um, I still remember what I wore the first day of performing arts. I still remember I wore like this fisherman's hat and these jeans and um, I look back on the PA on 46th Street with a lot of, uh, I can't think of the word, but like I really enjoyed those first 2 years. I
What
think
did you enjoy?
I liked where we were. I liked that we were near Times Square. I liked the building itself. I liked like the whole second half of the day was dance,
Hmm.
or maybe it was the first half. I forget if we had the first half, the first 2 years, the second half. Um, and I loved meeting people from all over the city. I thought that was amazing, and that there were other arts there. I hadn't met people who were actors or musicians very much
Hmm.
before,
Hmm.
and that was really great. And I think I remember going to Bojangles. Did you ever go to Bojangles? It was on Sixth Avenue between 46th and 45th.
I don't remember that.
Oh, I went there every day for lunch. So good. Um, and the teachers were interested in our art and we were taken seriously and that was really great.
Yeah.
um,
Who were some of the teachers who really had an impact on you?
well,
Yeah.
Dr. Reich had a really big impact on me. He was
That's,
just he was so passionate
yeah.
about something that I hadn't been passionate about.
Yeah.
I guess in some ways I thought you could only be passionate about one thing, dance. And then, and that he was sharing it with us. Like that it was important to him
Yeah.
that we also had that passion.
Yeah.
When even if we didn't, like in ballet, the teachers are passionate about what we're already passionate about.
Hmm.
And here's a teacher passionate about something that students may not be passionate about. And
Hmm.
he was a good teacher, I thought. But he
Hmm.
was a really good teacher. And also Mr. Apesen, who was in the drama department. We had some drama classes and we did Bomb in Gilead,
Hmm.
which is about drug addicts.
Hmm.
And
Who wrote that play?
I don't remember.
No.
Um, I'm sure people watching this will be like, I know.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, oh, I know how to play a drug addict because I've seen it so much.
Hmm.
And I remember like embodying that and it was really fascinating for me.
Hmm. 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 Um, can I be so bold and to ask if that was healing for you?
I don't think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was too soon for me. It was still happening.
Yeah.
There was no looking back on it. I think the only reason I could, maybe the only reason I could have made the ballet was because my father had already died.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although, when I wrote the novel at Sarah Lawrence, he was alive and I showed it to him. And it was healing for me to write that because I felt empathetic, and I felt like I had gotten it out, which is why I was so shocked when I made the ballet and I was like, oh, I didn't really get it out. But he read it and he didn't seem to recognize himself.
Hmm.
So that was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not what you expected.
I don't know what I expected.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I just wanted him to tell me it was good. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Um, when I talk to people about M&A and PA, and when I think about it myself, for so many people, it was such a normalizing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because in their particular neighborhood, in their particular high school, they were maybe the only one who was passionate about what they did, or they were the only one who came from a certain kind of family circumstance. And it seems that for many people coming to our school, they met so many people whose lives weren't conventional, whose families weren't conventional, whose interests were idiosyncratic. Did you have any of that?
I think not as much as other people may have,
Yeah.
because I had been going to ballet for my whole life.
Yeah.
And so I had like my dance friends already.
Yeah.
Um, and even though we may not have talked about what it was like at home, I'd been to some of their houses, and I had those sorts of friendships.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting for me of course, to meet people whose families were not artistically inclined. But mine were. Like, my mom was a dancer, my father was a painter. He's a visual artist.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to be a teenager where you do start having like more intense relationships and get to know people whose families didn't understand art.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel like I had been very interested in that before.
Mm-hmm. To go back to Dr. Reich for a second,
Yeah.
did you have him, I know this is going to sound so randomly specific, did you have him second semester sophomore year?
It's possible.
And were you in the class where he gave the assignment? We were reading, I think, Idols of the King or like medieval literature or something like that, and he had us go to the cloisters?
I never went to the cloisters.
No? All right.
No,
So
I wish I had. That would have been amazing.
it was a different semester.
Yeah.
One thing that I've heard from a number of people on Facebook and in conversations is that more than anything, what Dr. Paul Reich did, and sadly he's gone. He passed away. I think, I don't know, it was 2 years ago at this point.
Recently, yeah.
Was that he was a model for a kind of passion about books.
Yeah.
That if people had been exposed to books, then they experienced the passion on a new level. But for many students, they hadn't been exposed in that way. And it was kind of a revelation for them. And
what a great teacher.
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in some ways I might unconsciously try to emulate him as a teacher now.
How so?
Well, I really try to convey my passion for dance to my students, and I don't hold back. I don't try to be this lofty teacher, saying I know and you don't. I think I try to help them identify with it in the way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he did that. I feel like he opened up the literature for me. And he made it accessible and relevant.
That's well. Let's talk about your teaching now, because because it's a unique part of your work, and I think also it speaks to the way in which you want to make dance accessible to people who may not typically have access to that. So tell us about your teaching and the people you teach and how you do it.
I teach lots of people. Like even on Zoom, I'm teaching 15 classes a week, which is a little nuts.
Wow.
So I think the more interesting stuff I teach is I started teaching people with dementia probably about 15 years ago. When I lived in San Francisco, I moved away, I came back. And when I came back, I took a job with the Institute on Aging. I had never taught elders before, but I really loved my grandmother. So I thought, oh, well, I think I can do this. Maybe I can do this. And I went into some nursing homes and assisted living places, and they gave me, the Institute on Aging gave me a lot of free reign. They're like, just do whatever you want.
Hmm.
So I created a kind of movement vocabulary to use with people.
Hmm.
And I have been doing that ever since. And it's really deeply, deeply meaningful and satisfying to me. And then I also teach people with Parkinson's disease, and it's a similar thing, but I did a training through Mark Morris dance company. And so it's a little bit more codified. And we have live musicians for that, although not on Zoom. So those are the two things that I do that aren't ballet. Well, I do one other thing that's not ballet, but I do those two things, and then I do ballet.
It's for work.
Yeah, I feel like it's some of the best work I do. Right now I'm teaching the people with dementia. I'm not teaching right now because through the two-dimensional screen, it would be like incredibly confusing, and I don't think they'd even see it. Right. But I am teaching some elders through the phone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so they're just listening to my voice. I have no idea what they're doing. I can't wait until this is over and I can actually go and see what they're doing. Like I might be doing this and they might be doing like that. I have no idea because it's just on the phone.
Uh-huh. It raises an interesting question. What's really important to people in that encounter?
The connection and just moving at all.
Yeah.
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 We get together twice a week.
Yeah.
And I know I look forward to it, and they say they do. I mean, they must, or they wouldn't show up, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it a surprise to you to find that connection to elders was something that you really loved?
It was a surprise. I mean, I didn't think I wouldn't like it, but I had never considered it.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people love teaching little kids, and I knew I did not. It was interesting to find that there was this other community that I really did love.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the patience level is similar.
Mm-hmm.
Except with the elders, I feel like I get so much more. And they have this whole vast life and history behind them. Even if they can't tell me about it, I know that. And I feel a connection there. And I feel a lot of love from them. I think I was telling you, I'm not sure, but I teach for Unlock, which is an Asian, it's not assisted living, it's like a day center, and they have a lot of medical services for seniors. And I've been teaching there almost this whole time, and they don't speak English, and I don't speak Cantonese. I speak a little, and then they laugh at me, which is fine. Yeah, great. So we just communicate through movement and smiles, and that's incredible.
It sounds more elemental in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty basic communication.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. I mean, there's such a bias in our culture against elders. And, you know, in my experience, we tend to diminish what elders are capable of, particularly elders who are afflicted with Parkinson's and dementia. We, you know, I think the cultural bias is to assume that their lives are basically just one slow decline, but it seems like you're doing just the opposite. You're engaging with them in the belief that whatever stage you're at, and you can, you know, add to this or correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, you know, you're engaging with them as a testament to the idea that whatever stage they're at, there's, you know, joy, depth, discovery to be found.
Oh yeah, and meaning. I mean, whatever stage of life, there's a lot of meaning, and even if you can't communicate it verbally, I feel there's so much to learn from everybody. I think people are afraid of getting old. They're afraid of looking at it, and so they just tend to brush it away, like, oh, let's put that in the closet because it freaks me out.
Yeah.
And that's really sad. I think that's not, there's so much to learn, and people are just wasting that opportunity.
Yeah.
And at this point, you're lucky if you get old.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great privilege. But I want to come back to your work for a second, because there was something I noticed in one of your pieces, Dragons and Pearls. And one of the things we talked about earlier is the kind of the scrutiny of the body in dance, and how, well, there are many dimensions to it. In my mind, most of them negative. But particularly in Dragons and Pearls, I noticed that there are dancers on stage who one doesn't normally see in dance in general. In ballet, you have older dancers, and there was one dancer who was in a wheelchair.
Yeah, she can't speak. She had a stroke.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so that was a collaboration with Unlock.
Yeah.
And I have the guy who runs that whole program is just phenomenal, and he's really interested in, well, he's a music therapist, so he's really interested in having dance and music be a really intrinsic part of the seniors' lives. So he suggested that we do this collaboration. And they had been doing a project with a different store with StoryCorps. Do you know StoryCorps?
Well, tell us what it is.
StoryCorps is people go around to different communities and help record people's stories.
Yeah.
And they had been doing one with Unlock. And so I listened to a lot of their stories. They also had an artistic component, so people drew out some of their stories, which was great. So I decided, because I'm interested in narrative, to tell the story of one of the people who are actually in the dance, and it's their immigration story. And her story was that she had always wanted to leave China, and her husband didn't want to leave. So she stayed until she was 50. And then when she was 50, she came to America by herself and worked, and eventually brought her whole family over. And not as a young woman, like she did this as a middle-aged person. She's in the dance. And so I wanted to show that through dance, and I really wanted to have the elders be in it as a chorus. So like almost like a Greek chorus, where they're doing these repetitions as the woman who's playing the person as a young woman is leaving and like trying to leave and coming back and bringing her family. And in this, even though I think in real life she didn't miss her husband so much because he doesn't sound like a great guy, in the ballet version she misses him, and it's about them too.
Yeah. No, it's really quite a beautiful piece, because you have this couple, this younger pair, a man and a woman, who are moving about the stage and in unison and counterpoint and very fluidly and athletically. And then you have this group of dancers behind them who are almost like the Greek chorus. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know if I'm getting this wrong. And they're moving too. And their movements, while not as powerful or as demonstrably athletic, they're graceful and they're beautiful. And there's something so powerful about seeing, in particular, seeing the woman in the wheelchair on the end, raising her arm.
She's so great. So she could only move one side of her body.
Yeah.
And so she figured out how to hold the other side with her arm.
Yeah.
And like do the movements, but with this arm. She was great. She was so wonderful. It's so loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a thought here, and I wonder if you have a similar thought, that I wonder if, in time to come, we will see people with disabilities participate much more visibly in creating, in public performance, and in succeeding in that performance, not only despite their disability, not only as a way to overcome their disability, but through their disability.
Well, there are companies that do that.
Yeah.
Or dance companies that do that. There's one in Oakland here called Axis Dance Company. It's made up of people who are differently abled and people who aren't.
Yeah.
They're pretty great. So there are some people in wheelchairs, some people who don't have all their limbs. I did a workshop with them last summer, which was really informative in terms of language to use when you're working with people who are differently abled, because I wouldn't have thought of a lot of it
Yeah.
You think like raise your arms.
Right.
Well, maybe not. So, so there are people doing that work. I hope it'll become more integrated. I think there's a movement for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your knowledge, are there choreographers who are differently abled at this
Oh
point?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they work with people who aren't.
I see. Yeah.
The director of Axis, he used to be a ballet dancer and then he was in an accident. And I've seen work he's done with ballet dancers.
Yeah.
But he's the only one I know of, but I also have limited knowledge. So there could be lots of stuff happening that I don't know about.
Yeah. 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 I want to go back to something else. You said you took a 10-year period off from dance. What was that like?
It was, well, in retrospect, it was like a different life.
Yeah.
But I remember at the time thinking, okay, this is my real life.
Yeah.
And the other thing wasn't my real life.
Yeah.
I stopped dancing entirely. I don't think I even exercised for 10 years. I might have done, I think I did yoga, but I didn't, I was young, so I was like, I don't have to, I still look good. And that's when I went to Hunter College and I found a teacher, Louise DeSalvo, who again is a teacher who changed my life. And it's the first time I wrote about my father in a way that was poetic and almost as meaningful as dance. It was meaningful in a similar way in terms of self-expression. And then I went to graduate school with the woman who became my sister-in-law. My brother married my roommate. And then I moved to California, and I still wasn't dancing. I was still like seriously writing. And then I moved to New Mexico when I was 29, I think. And I was bored out of my mind. And I didn't have any connections, and it's really hard to make friends there. And I started dancing again. Oh, actually, so I took an Aikido class. And I thought, if I'm going to exercise, I want to dance.
Yeah.
So then I started dancing, and it was like finding myself, like that I had just been a ghost of myself, and I hadn't realized.
It's really powerful to hear that, and I know that we're getting the outlines here. But it's, first of all, it's powerful to hear about you letting go of the thing that had defined you and so structured your life, and finding, and giving yourself the opportunity to explore a new passion and meet a new teacher and new teachers and develop this part of yourself. And we haven't even talked about what it means for you to be a lover of literature and a writer and a reader. But then to come back to it, because while some of the people who I'm having these conversations with are active artists and accomplished artists like yourself, there are plenty of people like myself who at some point decided to put their art over here and pursue other things. And if you're like me, I wish I could say I never second guess myself, but I'm always thinking about the what ifs.
Sure.
And, even if at the time it made complete sense and still makes complete sense, it's never a clean break. And to talk about a life of going back and forth and exploring other interests and then reclaiming it is really quite powerful to hear.
Yeah, I still have those same feelings though. I think, if I quit dancing during the dancing years, and I think, I was pretty good. Like I could have really had I feel like now it's easy to say, but I feel like I could have had a better career as a performer. And I do regret, not every day, because I love my life and I'm happy with what I'm doing and everything brought me here and all that. But I do think, oh wow, what if I hadn't lost that ambition at the time? What would my life have been like?
And yet at the same time, I can't imagine that the time that you invested in the art of writing, whether it's memoir writing or fiction writing, I imagine that really also laid a very important foundation for the work that you do now.
I would imagine. I mean, the process of choreographing is similar to the process of writing for me.
Yeah.
You get a first draft out and it's crappy, and then you have to really craft it.
Yeah.
And not everybody's process is like that. Some people go like little by little and try to perfect every moment. And I don't. I kind of like vomit it out and then try to make it something after that.
Try to shape it.
Yeah. Try to vomit a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so what are you looking forward to in this time ahead? You know, not knowing, I don't know what San Francisco is like. I know it was, San Francisco was looking good for a while, and now it's, you know, in terms of COVID, and now it's different.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the election in November with crossed everything. Yeah, the numbers were looking good. Now they are not. We could have an entirely different and very long conversation about this country, but I think that's not what we're doing right now. I try not to look too forward because it's a little paralyzing for me. I try to look like here and here and here and here. So I told you earlier, I'm storyboarding my ballet, and in some ways I feel like I'm storyboarding my life. Like I can look towards this moment and this moment and this moment, but I can't look at the whole thing without those little, I can't look at the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I am looking, so my intention is to be able to rehearse this ballet in person in September. I changed all the partnering, so there's no physical touching. There's no touching, which was like painful for me because partnering is my favorite thing. But I've tried to change it so we have like rope tethering, like Sandra to Apollo, and then Lot's wife to Lot. They're just in their different worlds because he's talking to God and she's doing the daily stuff, and so they're kind of separate this whole time. So if the studios are open, which they're not now, in September, I'm looking forward to the possibility of rehearsing in person and then like doing this ballet in October to a theater with no audience and then streaming it.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to that. I feel sad that the commissions I had for 2021 probably are not going to happen. So I guess I'll just think of the next project for myself.
Well, keep doing it. Keep doing your work. Your work is so inspiring. It's really so moving to talk to you about sort of the inner dimensions of your work and your life, and a real privilege to reconnect with you. And
yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah.
This is great.
And I look forward to connecting again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.